Welcome to Subscription Prescription, the podcast where you get the information you need to scale your subscription program. Hello and welcome to another dose of Subscription Prescription. I'm your host, Matt Holman. This is the show that we talk about all things e-commerce subscriptions to help you grow and scale your e-commerce business. This week's dose is all about the subscribe and save option on your product page. Based off of a lot of content that I do put out on social media and an interesting Twitter discussion that I had with some CRO experts over last weekend, I thought that it would make sense to do an episode fully dedicated to whether you should have your website opt into the one-time option or the subscribe and save option. So one of the things we kind of like starting with this process is, as you well know, that it can be difficult to get people to choose the subscribe and save option. There's plenty of reasons why people are reluctant to try that, whether they're a first-time buyer, first-time visitor on your site, whether they're just skeptical of subscriptions in the first place. There's a lot of reasons why people aren't going to want to do that, right? But going a little bit deeper, there's something that I've talked about before, and that if you haven't got into this, is the psychology of opt-in versus opt-out. And so what this means is, just think of any forum that you've ever been on, and say they, here's a fun example, is say you're on a forum, you're signing up for something, and they ask you if you want to receive marketing emails and updates about upcoming products and services. Now, if this is a really, really cool company, you've been buying lots of stuff from them, you're going to hit that checkbox. Most of the time, you're not, though. People don't want to get more spam. It's natural. I don't do it. You're probably not doing it either. The difference is that some companies will pre-check the box for you so that you have to see it and deselect it. And some companies will leave the checkbox open and just hope that you will click that checkbox to receive more marketing information from them. And another really famous example of this opt-in, opt-out is when we're asking people, say, to be donors when you sign up for your driver's license, right? So if you're in the event of an accident, if you were to die or something were to happen, do you donate your organs for other people that are in need, right? And so there's been a lot of studies that are done on this opt-in, opt-out psychology. But say with the organ one example, they did a lot of tests here in the United States and in some of the Scandinavian countries. Opt-in, meaning you have to click the checkbox that you're opting in. They were getting about 10% conversion on that. When they switched it around and started, you have to opt out, meaning the box is already checked and you're choosing to not be involved in the program, 90% of people converted, meaning only 10% chose to opt out. And the psychology behind this is essentially, we might be a little bit on the fence or think about, no, I don't want to do that, so I'm not going to go through that extra effort of checking it, as opposed to, oh yeah, that's okay, I don't mind that. I'm not going to take the amount of effort it takes to opt out of that. So that's what we mean by opting in versus opting out. So when I say opt into subscriptions, I mean somebody's actually having to actively choose the subscribe and save option. Whereas when I say opting out of subscriptions, meaning they have to deselect subscriptions and choose the one-time purchase option. Okay. So with that kind of like basic footing down, let's talk a little bit more about some of the do's and don'ts and reasons why it might be compelling to have people opt out of subscriptions or to default to the subscribe and save option. On a lot of sites that I work with, brands that I talk to, and brands that I directly consult with, is typical conversion rates around subscription programs hover anywhere as low as like, say, 5% up to like 25, 35% for the classic one-time and then subscribe and save. So the opt-in method. So there are some that are pretty good at that in the 30%, but a lot of brands are typically hovering around 10 or 15%. And that's pretty classic, standard, typical. There's certainly a lot of things. You can check out my other content on ways you can try to improve that conversion process to convert at a higher rate. But that's typically kind of the way it is. Whereas when you use the opt-out methodology, where you default to the subscribe and save option, I've seen brands that were at a 10% conversion rate jump up to 40%, right? Or some going even as high as 60%, 65, 70%, one brand in particular. Meaning people are going along with the subscribe and save option, and they're happy with that. Now, that sounds great. You just want to convert a ton of subscribers, business solved, end of episode, wrap it up. We're good. We're all going to retire. But that obviously there's a lot of more complexity that comes along with that. So some of the downsides with doing that kind of method is that people feel like they got tricked. There's a certain subset of customers that are not paying that much attention, that are not reading all the fine print on your site, that are not paying attention to the checkbox as part of checkout that Shopify mandates that you mark that you know that you're subscribing to a product. I know. A lot of people are still surprised by those extra hoops that they're forced to go through. So you will have at least some small increase or a big increase in complaints from customers saying, I didn't know that I had a subscription, cancel, you guys are the worst. Your also initial first month churn is potentially going to be a bit higher because some of those people are now going to realize they had a subscription, or maybe somebody's like, yeah, okay, I'm okay with it. And then once they get it, they're like, nah, you know what? I don't really want a subscription for this. So your churn potentially could be higher in month one than it would be otherwise. So those are the two downsides. And that's, of course, juxtaposition with a higher conversion rate on subscriptions. So when we're balancing those two things out, there's a lot of factors that go into play. So some of the some interesting terms, a new term that I learned over the weekend, again, from some of these Twitter interactions with some CRO guys, really, really smart, sharp individuals, was revenue per visitor, RPV. I'd never heard that acronym before, but thinking about, yes, revenue per visitor makes sense, but RPV meaning what's your average site visitor, your average number, your total number of site visitors divided by the revenue that you're making each month. That's going to be your average revenue per visitor, right? When you default to the subscription option, you're going to convert less one-time purchasers. So your average revenue per visitor is potentially going to go down, right? Your top line initial, like first purchase revenue potentially could go down as well. Because again, think about, even though we, on the other model, when we're having people opt into subscriptions, you might only be converting, say, 10% of site visitors or landing page visitors to subscriptions. You're getting a lot of other people that are buying the one-time option. So by doing that, you have the potential of acquiring less customers overall. That doesn't always happen, but it is potentially happening. And so your initial sales for that month, just from first-time purchases, potentially could go down. But the goal here is to try to offset any potential increase in churn, maybe cost of the business by some customer complaints or people wanting to get out of the subscription, as well as a lower revenue per visitor metric that should be offset by higher lifetime value, or LTV, by acquiring more subscribers. So let's just use a very simple math. I know if anybody at home's cringing because of math, we're just going to do a very simple math example right here. So let's say on average you're converting 100 you have 100 subscribers you're acquiring every month. Okay. Month one, you typically lose about 30. So that's a 30% first month churn. That's a little high, but not very high outside of like what averages for what a lot of brands are seeing. Okay. So usually month one, you acquire about 100 subscribers, and you then lose the next month, you lose about 30. So by the time you get to month two, you have 70 subscribers left. Okay. Let's say you change from opting into subscriptions and you change to opting out of subscriptions. And let's say that changes just as a modest boost. Let's say that's just a 50% boost to conversion. So now you're acquiring 150 subscribers in month one. And let's say that churn number rises from 30% in month one to 40% in month one. Okay. So doing a little bit of quick math, 40% of 150 is going to be 60. So if we're going to lose 60 subscribers in month one, we now make it to month two with 90 subscribers instead of 70 subscribers, right? So we're acquiring almost a third more subscribers in month two. And so the trick here is looking at over time, are we acquiring more subscribers? Are we acquiring more subscribers profitably? We can talk as well as about like contribution margin, right? Meaning how much profit is each customer contributing to the bottom line. That number should be going up if we're going to switch to defaulting to the subscribe and save option. Another one of the kind of like opportunities there, again, for any business is if you're acquiring more subscribers, yes, you might be churning higher than you were otherwise, but you should be, total number should be higher, as well as looking for ways to boost the average order value or revenue you're receiving per subscriber as well. So that's another way. Hey, if I'm starting to get 90 subscribers to month 2 instead of 70, yes, I'm making money on that additional 20, but maybe there's something else I can do once I get them into month 3 and month 4 that I can make them more profitable overall as well. Then the defaulting to subscribe and save plus some back-end sales operations are going to make my business that much more money, that much more of a flywheel, right? That is the logic of how we go through building subscription business. But thinking through some of the process here. So that's kind of the logic. That's the balancing the pros and cons of this experience. So I'm not telling everybody has to be doing that. I'm just saying it is something you should be testing to see what happens, right? There's a lot of other content that I put out on other product page design, things that you can try to implement or test to try to see if you can boost conversions. So I highly recommend you check out either some other newsletter issues or their other podcast episodes to get some more information there. I do want to say a little bit about the defaulting to the subscribe and save option as a way of kind of getting ahead of this. I don't suggest anyone building a system or a process that makes people feel like they were tricked. I think that's bad business, and in time will come back to bite you in the butt. I almost stopped to ask if I can say butt on the podcast, but it's my podcast. So, but there are I think some best practices around this defaulting to subscribe and save option. The first is I think it should be clear. You can have the whole, instead of it just being, and this is hard without some visuals, but instead of just being like a normal, like say, here's the one-time purchase price and here's the subscribe and save 10% off. And those two options are just right next to each other. You can make the subscribe and save option bigger and a box. And it can say subscribe and save, get monthly 15% off plus free shipping plus 2x loyalty points. Pause, skip, cancel anytime. So it's in this big box. And then below that is just the regular one-time this is the price, right? So somebody's very clearly saying subscribe and save in big letters. And all this stuff comes with it. So there are ways that you can gamify that so that it looks appealing. It's a lot clearer to people that they're subscribing and saving. And if you don't want to subscribe and save, cool. You can always click down here below to get your one-time option. The other thing I think that you very, very clearly do, regardless of whether you're doing one-time option or defaulting or opting in or opting out, I want to keep all my terms straight, is clearly showing price difference. So the subscribe and save is showing you can test, this is another thing to test, is instead of necessarily just saying 10% off, you can actually test showing the price difference. Hey, if the price is normally 50, subscribe and save it's 45. When somebody hits the product page, that $50 price up top has a strike through with 45 after it. And then when they scroll down below and they see the subscribe and save option, they're going to see that the subscribe and save option is $45. But then when they click one time, the pricing very clearly changes to 50. We want to trigger right away if somebody's thinking, oh, I actually don't want this. I just want one time. Boom, hit them with, that's a higher price, right? Make that part of the experience so that somebody's going to think through a little bit. Maybe it is worth the commitment. Maybe I do want to stay on this because I'm getting this kind of value. Another option to be thinking about is eliminating the one-time purchase option entirely. There are a lot of brands that have found success with this. Essentially, one that if you haven't seen before, Tenzo T, Steve Odell, we had a conversation about this a couple years ago. Basically, it's really, really hard to find the one-time purchase option on his website. He's only looking for subscribers. That's who he's marketing to. He wants to find regular drinkers of his matcha tea. That's it. I love that mentality. It's actually a mentality that I think that more business owners, more subscription owners should adopt and think about. You're trying to get that best customer. That's not necessarily for everybody. It can be a little bit scary, I know, because you're potentially going to have a lot lower revenue per visitor, higher cost to acquire customers, because now you're not picking up some one-time purchases off of your Facebook ads. You're going to convert less overall, but the idea is to try to drive more profitable customers that you're acquiring. But I would suggest this is something that you can test, right? So if you're only selling a single product, then you can test this with landing pages and specific traffic, right? So if you have a ad campaign that's performing well, you could start A/B testing traffic that you're sending to the product page or to an alternate landing page that only has the subscribe and save option, or that has the subscribe and save as the default option versus the one-time option. You want to make sure you're tagging that correctly so you can see that on the back end in your reporting to see the difference between those campaigns, because you want that data to be separate. But the idea is you can actually test this incrementally to see, hey, when I run this traffic to this page and they have to opt into subscriptions, I convert 10% into subscribers. When I do it on this one, it's 30%. Interesting. The churn on these guys is, I lose 20% month one. Oh, the churn on these guys is only 25%. Huh. Okay. Those numbers look comparable. I want to start offering the default to subscribe and save option on all of my product pages or all of my products, right? So something you can test with specific products, specific landing pages, specific campaigns to start to see if they're effective or not. That does add a little bit of a layer to your reporting complexity. So if you have any issues or questions in that, please feel free to ask me. But that is something you can be tracking and you can start testing incrementally into how you can get into. But ultimately, this is a little bit of a shift for a lot of people. Are you thinking? Again, I know that selling subscriptions is hard. I know that it can be a little bit scary to think like, hey, how am I going to get people to want to do this? Or I'm just going to make people mad. But again, when we're adopting the mindset of we want to try to find the right ideal customers for us, that this is an option actually that makes sense. Hey, this is my best offer. This is what I got, right? If you feel like your subscription offer isn't compelling enough, then work on the offer. Work on a gift that you're adding, or maybe there's a bundle or an extra component, content, shipping. There's all these other components or levers you can pull to make that subscription offer more compelling. So you can always go back to the drawing board and think about that and working on that. But the idea is you want it to try to get somebody to commit. You want to force people to opt out because you want them to be thinking that the subscription is okay initially, not, oh, do I really want this or not? So that's kind of the mentality. So it does require a little bit of shift in thinking, a shift in focus, but it's something that's going to be highly, highly effective for your business, changing the amount of subscribers you're acquiring, changing the profitability of the business, ultimately changing the trajectory of your business, because now you're acquiring a lot more subscribers than you would have had otherwise. Okay, that's it for this week's dose. Please like, comment, subscribe. If you have any questions, you can drop them in the comments below, or feel free to email me, matt@thesubscriptiondoc.com. I'm going to start doing a lot more of these episodes or doses that focus on very, very specific elements and topics of subscriptions, because I believe this can be helpful and effective for you. So if you have been thinking about whether you should default to the subscribe and save option or not, or you know someone that is, please be sure to share this dose with them. Thank you. That's it. And I'll see you next week. That's it for today. Thank you for tuning in. Please subscribe so that you can get notified when new episodes come out each week on Tuesdays.